It's now my distinct pleasure to welcome our featured speaker, Katie Davis. Katie Davis is a Senior Director at Radius. Katie oversees Radius advisory client engagements across 5 continents. Is an expert in a wide variety of cross-border issues, including HR, tax, IP, and immigration consulting. Katie also provides hands-on client services to many of the firm's U.S.-based accounts with operations in Europe. With that, I'll hand the floor over to Katie. Katie, the floor is now yours. Please take it away.
So, hello everyone, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. The topic of today is really around how we attract, retain, and reward talent across international markets. And in that sense, we have to start with what does a company's international structure look like? And the reason that we have to do that is because if you don't have an entity or a hiring vehicle in a particular country, that can produce some challenges. So, for example, if you are starting out to think about setting up in France as a starting point, then if you don't have a legal presence in country, how do you pay them? So the first point of this is saying when you're looking to attract and retain talent internationally, one has to start with the corporate structure. And a legal presence in territory will indicate some commitment to the market in terms of investment, both in terms of your ability to attract top talent from your competitors, as well as obviously from your business perspective, it puts a footprint down in the market to say that you're committed. The reason why establishing an entity or understanding those structures is important is it because there will be certain interdependencies and timelines required to actually set up that registration. So, for example, imagine the scenario that you want to set up a subsidiary in France, but you want to hire somebody to start next week. Obviously, there's a timeline required to actually get the entity set up, get the bank account set up, which is required for the territory. Further, if you have employee benefits in territory, the type of structure of the entity that you have will impact what you can do in terms of benefits setup. In the UK, for example, if you don't have a local bank account, then you can't set up direct debits with a provider. So some real practical considerations that you have to look at when you look at the company structure. In terms of entity types and opportunity to minimize registration, there are some countries that allow you to have a payroll-only registration. And a payroll-only registration is seen as helpful because it minimizes your overall corporate compliance by not having a full-blown entity in country. However, in order to determine whether or not a payroll-only registration is allowable or appropriate, you have to start getting into a corporate tax assessment of whether the activities in country, either in the short, medium, or long term, will generate what's called a corporate tax nexus or permanent establishment. A permanent establishment, or PE, basically tells the tax authorities that you have a taxable presence in country and want to pay, if I can put it like that, corporation tax. And obviously if you try and fly under the radar screen and don't register an entity, even if you should be paying corporation tax, that's a risk and exposure for the company. So whilst we often set up payroll-only registrations in order to be able to hire people, you do have to be very careful of whether or not there's a corporate tax exposure. So in terms of the common entity types that we see, there's a representative office, a branch, or a subsidiary. And the branch and the subsidiary are the corporate taxable presences that really form substance in a territory. And those are the ones where if you're going to be hiring increasing numbers of people, you would expect to have that sort of entity because they are entities that pay corporation tax. So turning to really the topic, people issues. So when you're starting internationally, there are 3 main categories of employees that you'd look at. One is local hires, one is expats, and one are contractors. Now, an expat and a local hire will require a local payroll and reporting in that country for tax and compliance reasons in local currency. So it's important to start beginning to think about the compliance issues that go alongside that. If you have an expat, it's further complicated by the fact that you will obviously need to think about the immigration and the visa requirements that have to be thought about to enable the expat to work in country. And we're going to look at the expat scenario in more detail later on. And then the whole challenge with contractors or consultants is whether they're really deemed to be a de facto employee, and are they truly a bona fide contractor.